Hi, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So I can ask you to refill your coffee or your water or your lemonade, whatever you need. We'll go ahead and get our evening underway here. Actually, it's very much underway already. I was just commenting to Sharon and Bob here how nice it is to see so many people here together and see all these people in this room together and networking and fellowshipping. This is really kind of our first in-person event since the pandemic. We had a hybrid event in September of last year, and I think it was just a little too early for folks to venture out, and so we certainly didn't have a room as vibrant as this one here, so it's just really nice. I was almost hesitating to cut off all the conversation that was happening. I thought maybe we should just let everybody chat for a little bit, but of course you all are here for a purpose tonight, and so we should get that underway. So my name is Daniel Ward. I am the board president for the San Diego Regional Interfaith Collaborative, or Cedric. Cedric is a community-based interreligious network whose purpose is to promote and facilitate cooperation among religious communities and between religious communities and other institutions across San Diego County, so organizations, government entities, etc. And we do that to serve our San Diego community by sharing information, providing opportunities to connect and to get involved, and opportunities for service. I like to think about our Cedric events, which we put on twice a year, as really being centered around informing, inspiring, and connecting. So informing everyone who's here about the issues of that event, inspiring with some words to go out and to serve our San Diego community, and connecting all of you to one another, connecting you to Cedric, connecting you to the amazing organizations and government institutions that we have in San Diego County who are doing this work. So as I mentioned, Cedric typically hosts 2 big events every year, and we select the topics for those events based on what we as a board feel like are some of the most pressing issues facing our San Diego County community. And unfortunately, there's really no shortage of pressing issues, and so we always have a difficult time trying to decide what we should focus on. But tonight's topic, homelessness, is one that I don't think I need to tell you is critical. On your drive-in today, you probably saw it firsthand out of your bus window, your car window, throughout your day earlier today. And so, we selected this topic just because it is such a critically important one. And in the lead up to this event, after we had selected to focus on homelessness, individuals experiencing homelessness, it seemed like there was just a flurry of activity in the UT, an entire page dedicated to this issue, a number of articles and op-eds, so many things, and so just unfortunately, of course, really confirmed what an important and pressing topic this is. Before I introduce our evening's first speaker, I did want to introduce you all to the Cedric boards, who know who we are in this room. So we have Reverend Sharon Wiley, Reverend Liz Aguilar and Sonia Robinson, Rosemary Johnston, Suda Dalal is our newest board member. We're very happy to have her. We have Ali Monteleone here. Mo Winnicki by the door, our photographer for the evening. Some of you may know and may have seen Margie Carroll, who was here earlier in the evening, but she wasn't feeling well, and so she took her leave. Yusuf Miller, who is in LA. I think you probably know him. He's in LA for supporting an individual on trial, and so he's up there and could be with us tonight in person. I think maybe he's joining us online, so if you're there, hello, Yusuf. And did I miss anybody? No, I think I actually got everybody. Great. So that is the Cedric board. And I also just wanted to say that we are certainly interested in welcoming new members to the Cedric board.
John says the volume.
And so if any of you are
indeed
inspired and connected and informed after tonight's event, and you are interested in joining us in our work as Cedric, I would really encourage you to talk to any of the board members that I just introduced, and certainly myself as well, if you'd like to learn more about what the time commitments are and what membership on the Cedric board would look like. So please do let us know if you're interested. So as I said, this issue really needs sort of no convincing, I'm sure, for all of you about its scope and its severity. I think the 2020 count for individuals experiencing homelessness that year, which was the last one before this year. I haven't seen the numbers yet from this year. I mean, it was 7,600 individuals on our San Diego County streets. 85% of whom became homeless while in San Diego. I think there's sometimes a misconception that folks choose to come here, but the reality is that 85% of those individuals experiencing homelessness here in San Diego, it happened while they were here as our neighbors. Unfortunately, a big increase in seniors who are experiencing homelessness in the 55+ community. Between 2019 and 2020, I saw statistics, there was a 79% jump in first-time homelessness, which is pretty staggering and disturbing. And because of that, and because of the fact that this problem is such a massive scale, I think it's impossible, even if all of us in this room and all of our faith communities, our faith traditions, really did everything we could. I do think it's a problem that's going to require our government to be actively involved. And it's because of that we chose tonight's topic, specifically government innovations to end homelessness and the role of faith communities in supporting them. And so it's no surprise, it's an interesting coincidence that in 2021 last year, both the city of San Diego and the county of San Diego created new offices to address this problem. And so we're really fortunate to have speakers from both of those offices with us here tonight to talk about what's happening at both the city level and the county level in terms of addressing San Diego's homelessness crisis. And so it is my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker tonight. We have with us James Carter, who is the Deputy Director of Homelessness Strategies and Solutions Department within the City of San Diego. James has been with the City of San Diego for more than 6 years now, and has joined us here in San Diego after an illustrious career in many other cities in Portland, Oregon, in Washington, D.C., where he served in the mayor's office there for 4 years, and so a long career in service to cities and their communities. He got his BA at Harvard and then his MS at the University of Oxford in public policy analysis, and so he has a lot of great experience that we are fortunate to benefit from here in the city of San Diego. So without further ado, James. Just a word of housekeeping, I should have said, we're fortunate to have two amazing speakers tonight. When they're done, we're going to have time for Q&A with all of you, the audience. So please feel free to jot questions or thoughts down as they're speaking. And then after both of them have a chance to share with us, we'll have a chance to do Q&A with all of you. So thank you.
Know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Hello everyone, how are you doing? Thank you, Daniel, for the introduction. Thank you, Reverend Wiley. Thank you, the board members of Cedric, and thank you everyone who's affiliated with Cedric. And thank you for your time, after the workday and the dedication to this issue and to helping out. Daniel shared a little bit about my professional background, but I would like to think that my work in this space began with my faith tradition. My parents raised me in the United Methodist Church. The Wesleyan creed to do all you can in all the ways you can, by any means that you can, with every zeal that you can, all that you can. So I would like to think that my career began with when my mom would volunteer at our local food bank and in Arlington, Texas, and having that experience. Had the fortune to work as a court-appointed special advocate for a young man in the child welfare system in DC, and also as a mentor for another young man in the juvenile justice department. And from there, was recruited to work in the mayor's office on health and human services, child welfare, and juvenile justice in particular. So my wife brought me here to San Diego, a great place to be, but as we all know, just the experience of those who are living unsheltered, who aren't able, and as fortunate as some of the folks that we know, to live up to their God-given or higher power, if you will, potential, I think is something that I struggle with personally and professionally, and so inspired and so warm that there are groups affiliated as yours who are trying to figure out how to do your role, hold government to doing its role, and trying to figure out how we can work together to move this issue forward and to help people move from unstable housing into homes. So yeah, start first and foremost with a thank you. We'll tell you a little bit about the Mayor Gloria's establishment in the office. Tell you a little bit about our department. Touch a little bit on homelessness within the city of San Diego. And then, from there, I'll turn it over to my colleague and partner from the county to speak to what's happening on that level. So, and I guess I should start with our director. Hafsa was scheduled to speak here tonight. She has a family obligation, no emergency, so she had to go up to Orange County to help out with our elderly mom. So I'm here in her place to present to you guys. So our department is a new department, started in July, officially a department this past January with the mayor, Todd, Gloria, recognizing that this is such an important issue that he worked on as his legislator and wanted to establish an office to demonstrate that commitment. We're a small office, but a mighty office. There's about a dozen of us, and our role is coordinating city departments and city nonprofit agencies to work towards the goal of preventing and ending homelessness. So a lot of the work that we're focused on, a lot of the work that's the focus of our department is on the crisis response system, is a term that we use, and namely for that, for us that means our shelters, outreach to our shelter population. So as some of you may know, homelessness can not just be defined as though those who we may see experiencing homelessness on the street or sidewalk, but those also experiencing homelessness in a shelter, right? Because that's not a permanent home. Those who are experiencing homelessness, sleeping on someone else's couch. Those who are experiencing homelessness, sleeping in a car, in a recreation vehicle. Just a place that's not a permanent place that they can count on to lay their head in their own bed in a safe environment each night. So a lot of the city's focus is on the response to folks who find themselves in that emergency. So in operating shelters, and operating safe parking programs, and working with housing agencies to do prevention, diverting people away from finding themselves on the streets or the shelter. So just a little bit about our department. Our focus as a new department, we're trying to elevate collaboration, coordination, compassion, and equity to look at how our programs as they have operated, how we can do a better job and do it through a lens of compassion and equity. I think one of the challenges that I think everyone here can appreciate from a faith perspective is looking at these individuals who are experiencing homelessness with compassion. I think a lot of times people don't necessarily see the humanity or see the but for, that could be my uncle, but for, that can be my sister, or at some point that was me. But I came to a place where I got the services and supports and what was needed to reach full potential. So a lot of the focus on the department is around thinking of a person-centered, very compassionate way, and also just considering equity. We know throughout the history of the city and the history of our country, everyone doesn't have access to education, everyone doesn't have access to whatever, should say family wealth, if you will, in order to own their own home, right? San Diego is very unaffordable. So I think just kind of recognizing that we all didn't start from the same place to have a home, to access a home, and recognizing, at least from the government's perspective, that there's a role in trying to achieve equity in that regard. So very directly put, our department is successful if we reduce unsheltered homelessness, and if the homeless experience of an individual or a family is as brief and as rare in its occurrence and connecting someone with service. So that's how we measure success. I think it's hard in this environment with so much visible unsheltered homelessness to really get a sense of what's happening, but people are being housed, people are being connected to resources, and it's incumbent upon us in working with with the faith community, non-government organizations to make a bigger dent and to move forward faster with that. So a couple of things I wanted to share about our programs. City operates and supports about 11 plus shelters within the city of San Diego. Daniel mentioned the count of nearly 7,200 individuals experiencing homelessness in the last point in time count, of which about 5,000 plus within the city of San Diego jurisdiction, of which about a half of those, so somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 who are unsheltered. So providing shelters for those individuals. Right now, we have about 1,500 shelter beds that we fund. The city funds, the taxpayer funds to the city, but there are organizations like churches, under the rescue mission, and other churches provide shelter opportunities that aren't included in that count, if you will. But in the city, we figure there are about 2,000 shelter beds, shelter opportunities. In addition to shelter, providing safe parking, as I mentioned, the case management, the housing navigation, in a very, 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 very tough housing market. That's something that's very important, trying to figure out, in competing with everyone else who's looking for affordable housing, how can these populations get the services and supports to do that. Also recognizing that substance use and behavioral health challenges are an aspect of homelessness for many people, not all people, but knowing that that can prevent someone from staying in a home and being stable in a home, but also knowing that someone's sobriety and ability to be stable in their mental health challenges is not a condition of having a home. So just to make it personal, I have an uncle who has experienced homelessness and has also struggled with his sobriety. We would never say, I would never want someone to think that he would not be deserving of a stable housing opportunity because he's having that struggle. So a lot of what some of us may hear as housing first is the idea that someone's access to safe shelter and housing should not be conditional upon them checking this box or having, met some standard of deserving housing, if you will. And this the idea is that if you're trying to survive, find your next meal, find your next place to sleep, that challenge in and of itself can create, emotional and, can cause someone to be depressed. So it's one of those things, I guess, just to say that with this mayor and with our department, Housing First is a focus, but also looking at potentials for innovation. A lot of, with COVID, one of the things that the department has struggled with and we're continuing to work on is how to go about doing outreach in a safe way. And outreach in the form of people who take to the streets, go into the canyons, along the highways and encampments and engage people where they are. And there are obviously other forms of outreach as well, but expanding that sort of outreach and not leading outreach necessarily from a you've got to move along, like you can't be here sort of mentality, but what's your circumstances, how many contacts and engagements and building that trust and rapport so someone, to the extent that there is an opportunity for them, can make that connection, establish that trust to get services from what we describe as a crisis support system. I guess one other bit I wanted to add before passing on to Reverend Wiley and to introduce Omar is in terms of innovation, what we're recognizing, and this is something Daniel spoke to, is that homelessness amongst those who identify as female and amongst seniors is increasing in a disturbing way in what sort of housing environments are important for them. So a lot of people in thinking about shelters know of kind of these congregate settings where there are bunk beds, or cots or mats in a congregate setting like this. So sometimes when we have like inclement weather or rain, churches and different places will put out mats and cots in different places in an open environment for people to sleep. That's not an ideal situation for anyone, let alone for families, for seniors, for elder residents and older residents, or females or those who may be fleeing domestic violence. So one of the things that I've been working on day to day is trying to figure out how can we identify non-congregate settings. So non-congregate settings in the sense that each family, has their room, each individual, older resident has their room or shares a room, but just a place where, someone who wouldn't thrive being in a second bunk or on a top bunk, having a place for them to sleep. So that's one space that we're looking in. And then with regards to the role, I'll touch briefly on this, and I know everyone will have questions, with regards to the role of the faith-based community and how to partner with government. I think where we are, at least what I've observed over the last 6 years working in the city, is that a lot of the funding has gone to those who have received funding in the past. So I think one of the things I've thought about in my own church, in First United Methodist, and thinking about for my role here is to what extent can any organization, faith-based or not, get connected with those organizations and kind of get a sense of how they can be a part of their staffing or part of their service model, in addition to having opportunities to get grants and resources directly from the government. So I guess I would say maybe a challenge for this group is to kind of think about what are the opportunities to get connected, whether it be through kind of volunteer in-kind services for those organizations who are already in this space, and to what extent to introduce yourselves into that space for funding opportunities. And I guess the other thing I would ask is don't stop holding us accountable. I'm not an elected official, but I pay taxes and I vote as well. And I'm on a live stream, hopefully not recorded. But even if it was recorded, that's just to say that the voice of the community, the voice of this community is more important, and just as important as those who have big ideas and kind of their own perspective. So I think it's the role in social justice, I think that you were speaking of, that happens at University of San Diego, and just the role that each of you plays in trying to hold public service to kind of living out what we would expect for anyone, I think is, cannot be understated. So I'll leave it at that, and maybe pass it on to the next introduction.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, James. Hi, I'm Sonia Robinson, and I'm honored to be a board member here at Cedric, and also privileged to introduce our next guest speaker. Omar Passins is the director of the County of San Diego Health and Human Services Agency's Office of Homeless Solutions. He leads a team to align critical services and supports offered by the county to prevent and end homelessness. This work requires leveraging leadership both to help his team and through supportive partnerships with government and community leaders from a range of backgrounds. He is passionate about cultivating a strength-based leadership approach that recognizes the unique talents people bring to their roles and the importance of shaping well-rounded teams. Formerly as an attorney, Omar practiced construction and land use law. He began his career evaluating public health programs at the United States Department of Health and Human Services. The combination of Omar's experience of policy and community-level engagement on land use issues provides a strong basis for addressing the complex issues involved in addressing homelessness. Personally, I know Omar has been engaged in our communities to help bring real solutions in addressing our needs. That's how he and I met in our community, volunteering for solutions. Such as, Omar has served on the San Diego Workforce Development Board, the Management Committee of the Urban Land Institute, and the Board of CDC Small Business Finance. He is a past president of the Earl B. Gillian Bar Association. Omar received his undergraduate and graduate degrees at the University of Arizona and his law degree from George Mason University School of Law. He is a civic leader on issues impacting economic equity, youth homelessness, and creating opportunities for all members of the community to lead lives of dignity. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sonia. Good evening. I am going to do my best. So the first thing that I'll say, let me see. Did that work okay? Yeah. Does it sound all right? Okay, good. So I said good evening. My name's Omar Passins. I'm going to say a little bit about myself. I think Sonia did all the heavy lifting with very flattering and overly generous statements. But and then I want to lean into that. Inform, inspire, and connect that we started with, right? I want to do that. I'm not going to use the full 20 minutes, but it's intentional. My staff will say, man, you can just talk forever. So I want to try really hard, because what I think is probably true is that many of you have questions that James and I may be able to answer. And so rather than give you just what, like this can set of stuff, I want to make sure that we leave a lot of time. So if you see me look down and fidget with my phone, it's not out of disrespect. I'm not like checking my Twitter feed or something. I want to make sure that I don't go too long, because I get fired up and get excited, and you know, I can just get into it. So I just share that to start with. I'm going to try to keep it to about 10 minutes. And then no promises when you start asking questions, though. Then the answers might get longer, okay? So a couple of things I want to start off with. So I am the director of the Office of Homeless Solutions in the County of San Diego. And one of the things that I always try to start with in any group, in any situation, friends, cocktail party, well, there ain't no cocktail parties lately, but, you know, like whatever the events are, right? People say, well, what does the county even do? Right? Because we understand what our city government does. It picks up our trash. And, you know, we go down, we got to get permits to put a new deck in the house, or, you know, the local park gets maintained by the city of San Diego is where we are. But any city, there are, you know, I think 18 cities in the county of San Diego, right? The county, as a government entity, is essentially a local arm of the state government. And it has some very specific things that it does. The things I just mentioned, the trash, the parks, etc., the county has that responsibility in the area where there are no cities, right? So if you have friends in Spring Valley or Fallbrook or Bonita, right? Those are unincorporated areas. And the county of San Diego does all the things. Well, it does all the things that a municipal government does, right? It also has these other massive buckets of responsibility. And I will move us to homelessness, I promise. But this is an important kind of level set. Our justice system, right? Locally, the sheriff's department, the jail system, right? Probation department. Those are all run by county government, right? And those apply whether you're in the city of La Mesa or San Diego or the unincorporated county, right? So that's a county responsibility. And there's a whole family of things associated with that. Sometimes people who are experiencing homelessness, right, have a former connection to our criminal justice system. And that impacts our work, and it also impacts their lives and our communities. We can talk about that. But it's a county function. And then there's the Health and Human Services Agency, which is where my office is situated. Right? And I couldn't possibly spend, I'd bore you to tears if I went all the way down the list. But we have housing and behavioral health and self-sufficiency. So food stamps, or CalFresh is what it's called in California. You know, Medicaid enrollment, right? There's all of these different services that are administered, right? Federal government gives money, state government gives money. They give it to the county and say, okay, go make sure that people have the support they're entitled to, right, in many cases, like the CalFresh example. Or help administer some other funding. So, for example, the County of San Diego has received from the state funding called Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention. That is a funding source that the state provided, and it said, we would like you to figure out what the needs are locally for this money. In this example, we funded a change in the homeless youth system, created a program called Housing Our Youth that has, in just over a year, has met its 2-year goal to permanently house over 100 young people in San Diego County, as an example, right? I want to zoom out. So that's the sort of municipal kind of role of the county, the justice-y role. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the Health and Human Services role. The Office of Homeless Solutions, right, in a new department called the Department of Homeless Solutions and Equitable Communities, it's a mouthful, what we essentially do is to say, hey, you in the probation department, the sheriff's department, you in the behavioral health department, or the child support services department, or the land use department, or the zoning department, we need everybody to come together as a county body, because helping people get out of their homelessness experience, preventing people from getting into that homeless experiences, is not just about any one part of the county or those 18 cities I mentioned before. Like James and I and Hafsa and I and our colleagues and our teams, we've got to work together. If you live out in Escondido, right, we've got to work together, because you have needs. Your city has the ability to change the zoning rules to make it easier to put houses up, right? And you can work with developers and get lower cost housing done. But you need that county connection, because there are supportive services that your residents need, right? They need food, access to CalFresh. Some residents who are experiencing homelessness have mental health or physical health challenges. And so there are reasons for those collaborations. I want to dispel one important myth, and then I'm going to wrap the education part and move to what I hope will be the inspired part, right? So, I'm reading a book right now called Homelessness is a Housing Problem. I think that's homelessness is a housing problem, for those that are looking for weekend reading. That book and a book called In the Midst of Plenty are two things that anyone doing this work, interested in this work, ought to consider. In the Midst of Plenty is written by two long-term, they're both really well researched, and In the Midst of Plenty really lays out the case for what the reality is. What does the actual data tell us about why people experience homelessness? What does the actual data tell us about what works? And I don't mean what works in some sort of casual way, right? Like, well, I think it works because I do it, right? Sometimes, I've volunteered a bunch in my life. Sonia mentioned that we probably, everybody in this room has volunteered quite a bit. And it feels good to feel like we're making a difference. And that's important. And there's ways for us to understand which of the things we do work and which may not work or not work as well. And as James mentioned, that he's a taxpayer, I'm a taxpayer, probably everybody in this room, even if you weren't paying taxes. I'm not getting anybody's personal business, but even if you weren't, we probably all want things to work as best as they can, right? We want to get the most out of what we're spending and what we're doing. That's part of our work, and In the Midst of Plenty is a book that really lays out the evidence base for what works. Back to homelessness is a housing problem. Just came out in the last month. We just got back on vacation myself, and my wife's like, really? Are you really going to read a book about work while you're on vacation? Can you just relax, right? I mostly didn't read. I read a little bit. But here's the point, the take-home point of that book. Right? They looked at the differences in regional variations from city to city, all over the country, right? San Diego, Chicago, Denver, Portland, you name it. And what they determined, again, evidence, I'm not like, you can check their own facts, was that you could take two communities with equal rates of poverty, equal rates of substance use, equal rates of crime, and all of these things that we can be led to believe by the talking heads or this kind of thing are causes of homelessness. And what they determined is that the rates of those things had zero impact on the relative rates of homelessness. Zero impact. Any guesses what the biggest difference was between those places? Anybody? Cost of housing. Yes. It is, and I'll take it just a baby step further. It's the cost of housing also relative to what people are making in that community. Y'all probably saw the article in the last month or so in the paper about how the San Diego region has become like the most unaffordable in the country. Like that's awful. right? And I, you know, for those of us who own homes, you almost feel a little bit guilty, right? Like, because you're like, I didn't do anything to get this house to be growing by 10, 20%. I didn't pick a good stock or something like that. I didn't work harder than the people who are on my roof, right? For 8 hours, 10 hours in the hot sun. That we have this myth about like, well, I worked hard, I sacrificed. You know, a lot of people, it's not about like, sometimes it's about making good choices, but a lot of times it's just about having the good choices to make. And when you're poor, when you're struggling, when you don't have the support that James is talking about, sometimes you don't have those things, right? So the myth I want to dispel, to wind it all full circle before going to inspiration, is this. Check my little clock. I'm already pushing 9 minutes. Oof. The myth I want to dispel is this. There's a lot of stuff in the media about substance use and behavioral health related conditions. And our own personal experiences, right? Walking down the street, etc. We see people who are sometimes using illegal substances on the streets. We see people who feel like we don't. Most of us probably in this room are not behavioral health specialists, right? We see people. It's like that person seems like they have a behavioral health need, and that feels like that's everybody. That's everybody on the street. Oh my gosh! The myth to be debunked is this: there are far more people who have a substance use or mental health challenge who are housed than who are homeless as a percentage. And there are far fewer people, right? The majority of people who are experiencing homelessness do not have a behavioral health challenge. Now, there's a lot that does. It's really a statement about the scope of the problem, right? That there are so many people that also do have that challenge. But that's the education portion. Now let's get to the inspire portion, right? It's doom and gloom. Right, 30,000 people, 27 or so thousand individuals in the last year accessed a homeless resource through the Homeless Management Information System. And that's a huge number. James talked about the point in time count. That's a single night, where they ask my cousin or somebody to go out and count people in the middle of the night. And it's an important thing. I'm glad any counters in the room? Anybody do point in time? Some folks do. It's important, right? We go out, we interact, we engage with people. That's important. It's a single day. It says we get about 7,000, 8,000. It varies, the numbers. So you've got 20, 30,000 on a yearly basis, 7,000, 8,000 on a nightly basis. That's another piece of education. And it feels like it's just so much. It feels like, what can we do? The reality is that you all as members of the faith community can and have and will do tremendous things to make differences for people, to create conditions for people, right? Fundamentally, addressing homelessness, preventing and ending homelessness requires government intervention. It is government intervention in the form of some of the policies that made it hard to have a house, right? That created some of the challenges that we have, right? If I make it really hard by changing the zoning so that you can't have a 400 square foot unit that you can be in, like maybe we don't see that because it happens in slow paces, but there's a role, right? So there's a role for a government to play, but there's a role for the faith community to play, right? And I'll tell you a couple of the biggest. 22 years ago now, I worked for the federal government. I was detailed to the Federal Health and Human Services Center for Faith-Based and Community Initiatives. It's an old program that existed for a while. I was detailed down there because my experience before then at the community level in Tucson, Arizona was that there were only some people who would get out of bed at 4 in the morning or 3 in the morning or work till 12, 14 hours, all volunteer, because they were called to do so. Because they believed deep in their spirit from a different place that they wanted to help make a difference. I knew that, and I saw it when I got detailed to that Center for Faith-Based and Community Initiatives in communities across the country. That's a space that you all and your colleagues and your congregations and your parishes in your mosques and all share that can really make a difference. Because it gives you a place to experience people with compassion, to have the dignity that people, that you look in somebody's eyes and feel a sense that, this is another human being, right? And I'm looking at you with the sense that I want to help, I want to hear you, I want to listen, I want to see you. That's a thing that you all can do. And the other thing that you can really do to make a difference, many institutions, many faith institutions are on larger land than their actual buildings, right? So if you're thinking about, like, well, what can I do? One of the things that you could do is go have the conversation in your own congregation. Do we have more land than we need? Should we be working with the development community to potentially put a little courtyard of tiny homes on our property and work to bring services? Again, not everybody who experiences homelessness requires extra services. That is, so you may not, it's like, well, we can't do that with everybody. Maybe not, right? If you have serious physical health conditions, you might need a little bit more than a congregation can provide. But that's something that you can do, is have that conversation with your faith leadership, as an example. The County of San Diego adopted a framework for ending homelessness. It has five strategic domains that range from the ones everybody knows about, right? Services, treatment, and outreach. Emergency housing. I like to use emergency housing instead of shelter because shelter has a stigma, because people think of rows of cots in a room. Guess what? A lot of people who are experiencing homelessness don't want to be in a room in the middle of the night, rows of cots in a room. Right? So emergency housing, which might be individual units, it might be congregate. So that's another area, is emergency housing. Permanent housing, we know what that is, right? It's homes that people can afford to live in on a permanent basis. What the county's strategic framework also includes, framework for ending homelessness, is what happens upstream, right? And this is a place where you can also play a role, because this is about helping people get what they need in terms of workforce support, right? And that upstream prevention. Like, what are the things that close the gap between what people make and what it costs to live in a place, right? Some of this is going to always go back to housing and the cost of housing, and we've got to do something. But that upstream prevention is another place where you can play, and we have a strategic domain there. And then the other one is around right before the crisis, diversion. The problem is here. How do we help people not go to the street, right? There's a problem in your home. Something has happened, maybe a violent incident. Unfortunately, that happens. How do we make sure that there's a place for a person to go, right? You heard about seniors. Our Board of Supervisors recently approved an effort to create a shallow subsidy, a little bit of money that just help close the gap for seniors so they can stay in their home. That's an example of that diversion. I hope that when you leave, right, when we're done, and I'm going to stop and not even do the connection part because I blew through my 10 minutes. I hope that when you leave here, you think back, you reflect, you're driving or walking, you're talking to your loved ones or your friends or what have you, that you walk out of this space believing and understanding two things. One, that this is an issue that together we can address. We can prevent and end homelessness. We actually do know what works. And two, that you have a role that you can choose to play. And it isn't going to be the same for everybody in the room because we all have different experiences. Some of us are going to want to help, make sure people have food to eat. Some of us are going to want to go back and talk to our pastors or our imams or our rabbis and say, hey, what about us? Right? What can we do on the housing front? But you have a role to play, and you have that opportunity. As I sort of close and pivot, and I don't know how you want to handle the questions and answers, but I guess I would say this. The County of San Diego partners with the City of San Diego, the City of La Mesa, the City of Escondido, the City of Solana Beach, the City of National City, City of Chula Vista. We say to all of our partner cities, let's lock arms and work together to make sure that people have the path out of homelessness, and this is probably as important as anything that I'll say, and that we understand how to stop the path into homelessness. Because we can do all the work possible on the back end, right? And if we help 500 people get housed, that is wonderful for the 500 people that we helped get housed. But if 501 new people fell into an experience of homelessness, we probably ought not break our elbows patting ourselves on the back, right? So there's work that we can do together, and there's work that we're doing together. We're going to keep pushing. And I just want to say it's great to be in a room with people so committed and so interested in this topic. And so I'm going to pause there and look to, I don't know where to look. Can I just start taking questions? Oh, okay, there's a moderator. So thank you all very much for the time. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, James and Omar, not only for being here with us tonight, but for the important work that you're doing beyond this space. So thank you both very much. Before we dive into our question and answer portion, we're going to take 2 minutes. And what I want to invite you to do is to please turn to the person or people next to you and share with them a question that you have after listening to our 2 wonderful speakers. And then we'll come back in 2 minutes, and that will help generate more questions because I know there are some really good ones out there. So 2 minutes, turn to the person next to you, share with them a question that you have, and then we'll come back.
I see that people do alcohol, and on our side of the point, it matters. Those things get very quickly passed along and required. Yes. I would say that to the extent that what you're interested in is driving change, some of those calls needs to be like, hey, you got to send more money. You've got so I do the power that
The mayor, all department staff, staff, dedicated. Persistent voice, especially from the police.
I wonder how low power mode works with this. I'm not going to do that.
We should be able to make it, and if not, I can.
We're seeing it. Those are just
Questions from online, so
No one's coming in yet. Well, that's okay. They don't have anyone maybe next to them to turn to when they come back.
we should have 12 people online, but I think a couple of us are here.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's about what
Definitely. If they do pop up, please just let me know or give me a wave, and then that'll be great.
I'll explain ours.
Okay, my friends, go ahead and take another 30 seconds or so to wrap up any thoughts that you have, and then we'll come back together.
Strategic enterprise-wide prevention. It is started from scholarship. So they essentially said, okay, what do we know? We missed money, Joe Caduri, very good shit. Like, Coinbase has cited. Hey, it's a great move.
Oh, thank you very much.
Our table were like, we're going to steal that. I was like,
What we start
I can't take credit for this Cedric. He does that to me.
is, what do we know? That's the planning part of it. Is much more or less story.
So whenever you feel like you're done or you're 18 years old, like it's less 5-ish, if I could drive whatever.
Just have to raise their hand and then stand up.
This is what you should. I think so. Because we're going to share it too. It works. It's just part of our. I don't know. I mean, that way, like with being on the mic, then they don't have to. We're developing evidence base. Oh, thank you so much. So it's a mixture.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you all so much. I hope that you've had the start of some stimulating conversations with your partners around you. What we will do is take a few questions at a time, just because we'll be sharing the mic, and so that will allow for our presenters to be able to speak a little bit longer instead of passing back and forth and back and forth. So, who has a burning question that they would like to start us off with? Yes, right here.
Hi, I'd like to address this question to both of our speakers. I am with the church in Hillcrest, and several weeks ago, the police came to Hillcrest and swept everybody out. And I wondered what your offices do and how you work with police, and whether or not you support that approach to dealing with homelessness in San Diego.
Yeah, they can't hear it.
Okay, great. I will repeat the question for our friends online. Thank you so much. Great. So our friend here is part of a church in Hillcrest, and recently the police came in and swept everybody away. And so she is asking of our two presenters what they do to work with police. Have I missed anything? That's good.
Like, do they support that?
Yeah. Do they support that? Cool.
Yep.
Thanks so much.
Now, I don't know if you want to take multiple questions. I'm happy to give you a quick answer. I actually can be quick.
Oh, quick answer. Sure. Great.
Quick-ish. So I'd say a couple of things. One, so the county obviously oversees the sheriff's department, and so we don't have a role with any of the city police departments. But conceptually, your question about sort of the law enforcement's role, that kind of thing, I would say this: our board adopted an overhauled policy A128, our comprehensive homelessness policy, that explicitly stated that the county of San Diego was moving towards social work, street outreach, and away from law enforcement engagements as it related to people experiencing homelessness. I can tell you from my own experience going into encampments in unincorporated parts of the county, that's exactly what our sheriff's homeless assistance resource team, the HEART team, that's a special part of the sheriff's department that is not focused on enforcement. They go out with our social workers, et cetera, and they look for ways to help people get into housing. And in fact, I'll tell you, like, this isn't the stuff they share always in public, but I get calls from the sheriff's deputies who are like, man, can you get us some more housing? Like, we got people that really want housing. Can you help us? Our sheriff's deputies on HEART, they desperately want to help people get housed. Now, that's not the popular thing to say about the law enforcement, but it's the truth. Like, I got the text to prove it. So I just want to say our county focuses on non-law enforcement engagement as the way to go with regard to outreach in terms of the county experience. So that's that part of it. I can turn over to James to talk about the city. Sorry, I don't.
You can speak to it if you like to, but you don't have to.
Sure. So briefly, just to add, with it happening in the neighborhood of Hillcrest within the city, within the Homeless Strategies and Solutions Department, over the past year and a half, there have been more resources dedicated to the social worker, kind of the social service focused type of engagement with residents. The reality is that some of our neighbors do want there to be a role for law enforcement to help deal with the right-of-way. But I know over time the shift has been made, and our department's focus is trying to do that outreach and engage folks who are living unsheltered before it gets to the point of some neighbors wanting for there to be a different response from the city as far as engaging individuals experiencing homelessness.
Sorry, I know there's more questions. I broke the mic already. I did want to say, and I'll leave it to you, I don't know about a question, but I did also want to say, like, we see all of the dimensions of this, and I have also been in community meetings where community members talk about their lives being threatened, their children, being accosted. Like, I do see all the dimensions, so I don't want to suggest that there's only one sort of realm of this, but I think it's really important about where we start. For every one of the examples I just described, there are many, many more where people just want to help. They want to get into housing. They want to get that support. So I don't want to leave the impression that we're just all in one place or another. So I just wanted to add that piece as well. Sorry, I broke your.
No, you're great, no problem.
We have some online.
Oh, great. Yeah, we have some questions from online.
Yeah. So this comes from someone saying, she works for a nonprofit that has been trying to buy land to build affordable senior housing. It has been very difficult for years. Does the county have any land it will make available for truly low-income housing? She's particularly interested in the South Bay area.
So it will surprise literally no one to know that, like, the director of the Office of Homeless Solutions can't unlock county land in an evening presentation. But I would like you to type in my email address, if you don't mind, because I do know the department where you would get that information. And part of our job, frankly, as servants of the public, is it doesn't matter if I'm not the guy or the gal or the person. If I know who they are, why am I going to make you, like, do a bunch of somersaults? So in other words, I will put this person in touch with our Director of Housing and Community Development Services, who would have that information, or our Director of Department of General Services, who sort of oversees the property that the county has, so that that person can go directly to the right individual to engage that conversation. And my email is just omar.passins at sdcounty.ca.gov, and I'll make it available again later. I don't want to take too much time, but so that's the answer. Is I know that the county has made properties available in the past. Typically, just for everybody's awareness, when the county does make its property available, it has to be available to everybody, right? Like, the county doesn't get to make like a special deal here or there. They say, look, we've got a piece of property, and we want every eligible person or entity to be able to have a shot at putting something useful on the property. That's just a matter of fairness across the board. So just a couple of things. So I'll give it back to you, and there we go.
Could you just say a little bit about that? Because of the cost, they get chosen because they're willing to pay more for the real estate, or because they have a good cause?
So the question, the little supplemental additional question was, do people get chosen because of the cost that they're willing to pay, or for some other reason? And I would say to you that there is a complex set of evaluation criteria, some of which are about, like, how many people would this help, right? And where is it located relative to transit? Or, like, there are lots of different factors. I couldn't just pick one. And again, the people I mentioned, my colleagues in the other departments that lead that work, that's where the expertise is. So I don't want to get too far out of my lane, but that's the answer.
Could you repeat your email?
I will again at the end. I want to make sure to give it, and I'll stick around. Afterwards we can chat more.
Thank you. Yeah, how about a couple of more? Sure.
Yes, I would like to give my name is Pastor Moten. I would like to follow up on the first question that was asked, yet right here. First of all, when there is going to be a sweep, is there advance notification given to those individuals who are in that particular area? That's number one. Number two, when they do a sweep and people have not gathered their things together, what happens to their stuff? And then finally, you're putting a person who is already in a dire situation in a much worse situation due to the fact that the very few things that they may have are swept and gone. So they're starting over again, and now they've got to find another place to swap. So the final end of that, gentlemen, and thank you both for your time. Good to see you, Omar.
Yeah, yes,
and James, pleasure. What did happen to those people? What is your method of looking at this, trying to help that person? Because it seems like you swept them, but now they're just stuck somewhere else, right? The garbage is still where it is. That's not. I'm not using that referring to the people, but if you're sweeping things aside, you got to put it somewhere, right?
Thank you very much. That was you're welcome to come up. Yeah. That was a follow-up question to the first question that we received, and I'll take it in 3 parts. So the first is, when there is a sweep of individuals, is there advance notice to those individuals? The second part is, what happens to their belongings? And the third part is ultimately, where do they end up?
The people or the belongings?
Is that where the people end up or where the belongings end up?
Well, the people most importantly.
Okay.
The belongings, once they're gone, once they speak, they're gone, right? They're not gonna get that back. But what do they do with the people?
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Yeah, and to clarify, that is where do the people end up?
So from my purview, I'll give the best response I can, and as Omar did, share my email address, so you can speak directly to those on the law enforcement side, police department side of the city, so they can provide, their protocol and process in detail. So to your first question, there are different types of, you can characterize it as cleanup, law enforcement engagement, outreach. There are different types of engagement that take place. There are those that there is advance notice. I know our environmental services department will give advance notice when they come into a space to address sanitation or concerns of health and safety. With regards to what happens to those people, I know, or the individuals who are displaced, I know that the outreach workers that are funded are expected to be persistent and follow those people and find those people and continue their street-based case management. So I can speak to those two aspects. I can't speak to law enforcement policy because that's just outside of my knowledge, but my email address is jmcarter@sandiego.gov, jmcarter@sandiego.gov, and I'm happy specifically to your first two questions, your first and third question, to route you to my colleagues who can be more specific than I can. Similarly, we have a sheriff's department that has their own sort of policy apparatus. I can tell you the question about, so I've been doing this work with the county for about 3.5 years. The department and the Office of Homeless Solutions is new, but it's work that I was doing in a previous office before that. And at no time since I've been at the county has the sheriff's department's policy been for the county to sort of do the kind of sweep where you come in and push people out and that sort of thing. Homelessness is not a crime, right? Being poor is not a crime. Not having a home is not a crime. Crime is a crime, right? And we ought not be mince words about that, because here's the thing. We don't talk about this that much, but you know who some of the most significant victims of crime are? People who are experiencing homelessness. And our law enforcement wants to protect them as well, right? So again, the county's policy A128, just overhauled this year, fundamentally changes the approach towards social work. They increased, two of the supervisors called for increases in street outreach. It led to additional social workers in my department, or in my office, and our staff. They are out daily. And I know they're out daily. I've shadowed them in the field, so I spent that time. But that's the answer. Also, on the stuff question, on what happens to people's belongings, it is a mixed bag. Sometimes, unfortunately, people's belongings, like maybe somebody doesn't realize that belonging is like an important possession, right? So there's that part of it. And working on cultural humility, right? Recognizing that we don't know everything, no matter how many letters are after our name or what our job title is, or we happen to, have a house or don't have a house. Like working on cultural humility, also important for our colleagues in law enforcement, in parks. You know what? Most people, I'm sorry, just real quick say, the Parks Department asked me to come out and do a talk to their entire staff, because they wanted to hear more about, like, not just the new department, the new office, but what could they do to help? What could they do to be good partners? Right? This is the park rangers. They didn't go to school or do their job to become like homeless services workers, but they wanted to know. And they signed up to take trauma-informed training classes because they wanted to know, well, if somebody comes into my park, how do I do this in the right way? Right? So sometimes what we get is the bad stories. You never hear anybody stand in front of you and say, well, let me tell you about the guy I talked to last week who's a new park ranger, brand new to his job, and he was totally committed, right, to making sure to help in the right way with the person he interacted with. I had a staff just 2 days ago say, hey, I can't make our leadership team meeting because I've been working to try to get this guy in a house, and we're finally going to do it. And he texted me a picture later that day of the guy getting into his house. Guy who had physical ailments.
that got into a house now and he's permanently housed, right? We work with people who deeply care about this work. And sometimes you don't get to hear that because you read in the paper and say, oh, this, that, and the other. I just want to make sure folks understand. We're not perfect. We have a lot we have to do better, a lot more work to do. But understand that we are really trying to put compassion and dignity at the forefront of the work we're doing.
Can I please respond?
Yeah, I think so.
Someone was asked, what happens to these people's belongings? I've witnessed this. They bring a dump truck in. They take all of their belongings and they throw it in the dump truck and they tell them to get the hell out. That is not compassion, that's not dignity.
Nancy, did you have a
question?
Okay.
Our question is about money. We're concerned about psychiatric help for, this is probably most likely for county.
It's a question for the county.
County and city as well, because we have hospitals everywhere and psychiatric services. So our question is, are special funds set aside for psychiatric help for the homeless? Number two, how are homeless people processed into psychiatric services?
Could I elaborate a little bit on that question?
Yes.
Sorry. We read that there are literally tens of millions of dollars available, mainly in state funds, but some federal funds, for psychiatric services. And at the same time we read that counties, I've read this in the LA Times a few times, the counties are not availing themselves of these funds. And we hear also of San Diego that one of the problems with homeless people and psychiatric services, the services are simply not there, the beds are not there. The beds are not there yet. Apparently the money is there if the county, Mr. Omar, department, would simply ask for the money. Is that true?
Good. And I'm told that Kelly is typing the questions from the audience to the folks online.
I think it'd be good to say them for the recording.
Okay, great. Great. Well, maybe you can help me with the second part of that one then. The first is that are there funds available for the psychiatric support of folks experiencing homelessness?
And how are homeless people processed into these services?
Thank you. How are homeless people processed into these services?
We hear lots of different things. Are the beds there, not there? Clarify.
Beautiful, thank you. We have heard lots of different things. Are the beds there? Are they not? Could you please clarify?
And money.
And about the money.
Money for services.
Yes, and about the money for services. Thank you. That was a good team effort.
So one of the challenges about working in an entity that has over 7,000 employees just in the Health and Human Services Agency is that these things are handled in specialized ways. So our Behavioral Health Services Department is the source of expertise. It oversees the San Diego County Psychiatric Hospital, as an example. So, so I can't tell you exactly the sort of budgetary answers to the psychiatric hospital for the County of San Diego, but I know how to get that information, and I'm happy to help make that connection. But I do want to address a couple of the sort of bigger picture points, right? Which is, are there resources that exist to help people who are experiencing homelessness that have psychiatric needs? The answer is yes, there are resources available. The question about the scope of those resources relative to the need is one that's where the challenge is, right? Is people don't often understand that even when there is money, it is often just simply not enough of it because of the magnitude of some of these needs. I have to defer the specifics of how people are processed into psychiatric care to that behavioral health department. That's just, I'm not a doctor, and I did not stay in a whatever hotel that is last night in the TV commercial. To your question, sir, about you read about like, oh, there's money that isn't being, people aren't availing themselves of. I want to do something. I want to ask for your indulgence and say this, right? I'm going to give you the real answer, and it's complicated. And I think sometimes you get like pithy little sound bites and nuggets, like people talk to adults like they can't handle a more complicated answer. So I'm going to answer the question directly and just ask for everybody's indulgence, and I'll be quick about it. The answer is that there are a mixture of reasons that dollars that the state or federal government make available may or may not get applied for. Sometimes it's that they only gave 5 weeks to apply for a funding source with no warning that the funding source was coming, and there's no it's not like staff just pop out of nowhere, right? Like there's other work that's backed up that they're doing, and I know because I see it in my staff. I see it in the long hours that they're working on these constant priorities, right? So part of the answer is sometimes we're not able to apply for very practical reasons. The other part is a lot of these resources are competitive, right? The state puts out, they put out like $30 million for an encampment resolution fund not too long ago, right? And some local jurisdictions didn't apply, some did apply, but $30 million for a state with 58 counties and cities were available. There's 18 cities in this county alone. They all could apply. And so the question becomes, right, if we're figuring out how are we going to allocate this staff's time, maybe we don't apply for that one because there's a $500 million one coming. But if you just read it in the paper, right, or on the news and just catch a piece, it'll look like, oh, well, so-and-so's not applying. The reality is that I can tell you that we are very thoughtful and aggressive about going after the resources that are available. It hasn't always been true for all entities in every jurisdiction, but speaking in terms of the county, there is a significant push to go after the resources that the state is making available. And in fact, and this is where I'll pause, so sometimes we don't go after money and there are reasons, and other times we do and maybe aren't successful. But one of the things that we try to do to be proactive, to your point, is to talk to the state. And we actually did this and say, hey, can you just give us can you just wait an extra 6 weeks before you roll this next one out so that we can prepare for it? It's like any business, right, would be like, I have to prepare for what's coming. So that's the other thing. And the state, to its credit, has actually been kind of responsive. So there's a couple big funding sources that are coming that they said late last year, we're going to wait a few months. Not because we're of the urgency, or we know there's urgency, but we want you to have time to thoughtfully respond. So that's a more complex answer, but it's the truth. Sometimes we don't for a variety of reasons, and other times it might not be successful. But there's not we're not just sitting on piles of money, not doing things with it. That's a thing that I want to be clear about. So, and I'll stay after if you want to do more about that.
I just want to pause for a minute for the pain I heard in the room a few minutes ago. And I want to invite us to take a breath together. I want to thank those of you who have come to bear witness to what you've seen and the pain you've seen. Thank you. I just didn't want that moment to go by and not have us stop. We're people of faith. And I just want to say out loud and remind myself, as I mentioned to you, that maybe the next time we're praying, that we pray both for our friends and kin who are homeless on the streets, and for the many, many people who are working in so many different ways to try and solve that problem too, and pray for them. Thanks.
Okay, I think we have time for about 2 more questions. Rosemary, would you like to?
Yes, I think there's a great disparity in the way that the Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington, D.C. allocates its funding. San Diego has the region has the 4th largest homeless population in the country, and yet we're ranked 22nd on the HUD funding allocation. And the reason for that, I understand, I ran the Interfaith Shelter Network for 17 years.
Cities to have more affordable housing, or whether that's the cost of utilities and cooperative models. So I know there's no one solution, but I'm just curious, from your perspective, what are policy initiatives that are things that we should be like on the lookout for, or that we support, or like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So the question for the folks that may be watching on the streaming is just, what are the, in terms of upstream prevention, what are some of the policy areas that people can potentially support or be aware of that may actually lead to solutions on the prevention side? Is that fair characterization? So there's two things I got to say. The first is I always have to be careful as a staff member, right? We don't set policy, and so I always have to be careful to make sure that I'm not getting in front of our board of supervisors, who is the elected body responsible for making policy. So I won't do that, and I think I would encourage folks to tune into the State of the County or watch it online. I think it's actually happening tonight, so you could find out like what is the policy vision. I will say this though, one of the things that most people don't realize is that the vast majority of people who experience homelessness come out of the 0 to 30% area median income or extremely low income bracket. 0 to 30% area median income. And so what is that? Well, those are words. What are you saying? The point is this, really, is that most people who experience homelessness are extremely poor before they get to getting into that experience of homelessness. And the cost to subsidize those units is substantial and hard to do, right? It's hard to make regular market rate pencil in a place like San Diego. So the thing that you can do that is already the stated policy of the county and probably the city, but in terms of your own thinking about this stuff, is asking how much of our resources are going to that 0 to 30% area median income, that extremely low income sort of band, right? In other communities, sometimes it can be as much as 80% of their resources are going there because they realize that that's where you're most likely to make that really impactful difference. So that's a good sort of tangible example. Supported employment, which is an example of not just employment services, but really sort of like wrapping around for people who have behavioral health challenges, is one that, back to the question, we had a side chat when we did the turn to the left earlier, and Rob at our table said, well, do you do any sort of academic research before you launch new programs? And the concept of supported employment, right, is an example of a model that works very, very well for people who have behavioral health challenges and other challenges, to help them get some gainful employment that can help bridge that gap. Because sometimes it's not just bridging like $0 to all the way to whatever the rent is now, $1,800 or $2,000 or something absurd, right? I've got Social Security, I've got maybe some other form, and I need to close a smaller gap. Well, if I can get some supported employment and help, I might be able to close that gap. And so that's a model that has proven success, but requires subsidy, requires some support. So those are a couple of policies, I think, that are safe for me to say because I'm not getting in front of anybody, and so there you go. I don't know, James, if you want to add it, that's good? Okay.
Thank you all very much. I believe that for the sake of time, we're going to transition it over to Liz in a moment, but I see that there are still hands up and some questions to be asked. And so I will say that after we hear from Liz, there will be an opportunity to continue talking with both James and Omar. So if you do have a question you'd like to ask, please come and approach them. And thank you both for your openness.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Liz Aguilar. I'm Senior Pastor at Community Congregational Church, and I'm a very new member of the Board of Directors for Cedric. I just want to begin by thanking all of you for attending tonight, whether you're attending online or here in the room in person. Give yourselves a round of applause. We certainly want to give a very hearty thank you to St. Bridget for graciously hosting us this evening. Thank you, St. Bridget. And just have a few announcements for you all. The first is that if you notice, there is a flyer on your table. and it is about an opportunity to continue our conversation together around a meal that's happening in April. So please plan to attend that. Tell your friends. And then also, our next big event that we are sponsoring will be happening in September 20th, I think was the date that we settled on. And we will be focusing that evening on the opioid crisis that's going on in this area, San Diego, the fentanyl overdoses, etc. As we know, that is also a huge topic that we, people of faith, want to learn more about and also be proactive about. So please put that on your calendars even now. And I encourage you to check our website from time to time, or also follow us on Facebook so that you can see what our latest events are about and all the information. Also want to just kindly, gently, yet boldly encourage you to consider giving to Cedric. We know that there are many nonprofit organizations that you can be giving to. Some of them you represent here, but we really do encourage you to give if you're able. You can write a check and make it out to Cedric, use our initials, and put it in the envelope and then give it to one of the members of the board of directors. And if you can hold up your hand again, board of directors, so people know who you are, you give it to any of us. Or if you'd like to later on, go online, and you could also give on our webpage online. Okay, just wanted to now encourage you to stay if you're able and spend more time with our speakers, and we want to give our speakers definitely another round of applause for your graciousness. I think that you will agree with me in saying that we accomplished what our part of our mission is, which Daniel had shared with us, which was to inform, inspire, and connect. So good job. Thank you.